So let's get started with Write a Winning Resume. Now during this interactive session, we're going to be reviewing the resume resources available to you on the Career Services website. And we're also going to be reviewing some general resume tips. The remainder of the time I'm going to be spent answering your resume questions, so hopefully all of you came with questions in mind. Now to start out, I'd like to go over the Career Services website. The website can be accessed from your My Walden portal or by going directly to careercenter.waldenu.edu. All of the resume resources can be found on the horizontal navigation bar, and here you can view tips for tailoring your resume, the various components of a resume, and optimal resume, which I'm going to be highlighting on the next slide, and also some sample resumes to help you get started. Now, Optimal Resume can be accessed from the Career Services website or by going directly to waldenu.optimalresume.com. Optimal Resume Builder is a tool which assists you in crafting professional-looking resumes and other job search-related documents. There are over 100 sample resumes for you to review and use, and this is a really great resource if maybe you haven't created a resume in a while, or if you're interested in reviewing different resume formats and incorporating some new ideas into your document. Now, along with the Resume Builder, there are 4 additional modules to help assist you in your career management. We have a Letter Builder, which helps with designing cover letters, follow-up emails, and all types of professional correspondence. We have a Portfolio Builder where you can put together examples of your work, letters of recommendation, and other evidentiary items toward finding a job. And then we also have a website builder where you can put everything together and you can email out prospective employers a link. We also have an interview prep tool, and this is a tool that can help you to conduct mock interviews on your own. So the optimal resume system is a very robust system. We could do a whole session just on optional resume. And we currently have over 15,000 Walden students and alumni utilizing this system. So if you haven't already taken a look at it, I highly recommend that you do that. I also want to highlight some of the webinars that we currently have archived on our website, which are highlighting some resume skills. We try to deliver live webinars frequently, and we record them all. So if you're unable to attend a live webinar, you can always view it in the archived webinars gallery. A few that you might want to take a look at are crafting effective resumes, creating your CV, building your professional brand, and the job search support series on self-assessment. Now I'd like to review some general tips for tailoring your resume. Now the first part of creating a tailored resume is to identify a job posting. You want to take note of the qualifications and requirements being sought and think about how you're going to highlight these qualifications in your resume. Too often folks will try to create a resume that is going to be perfect for all opportunities, when really you should be trying to identify an opportunity and build your resume around that opportunity. You want to remember that the resume is a document where you show your skills. You don't want to tell a reader you're a good communicator. You want to show how you're a good communicator. And in order to do that, you want to craft strong achievement or skill statements. And we recommend that you do this using the CAR formula, which stands for challenge, action, and result. Now you want to start your CAR statements with strong action verbs, and you want to quantify how many or how much as often as possible. This is, there are several reasons to do this, but one of which it just simply is an effective utilization of space on your document. So instead of saying responsible for assessing employees, you can simply say assessed employees. Now finally, your brand must stand out in your resume. If you're not familiar with professional branding, the idea is, what is it that makes you unique? So ask yourself, what are you currently the go-to person for? What kind of contributions do you make to your current or potential organization? If you want to further explore your brand, we recommend that you view the branding resources on the Career Services website. And when you do all those things, if you start with a strong job posting, you really showcase your skills using those CAR statements and strong action verbs, that you add quantifiers and showcase your brand, you're really creating a tailored resume that's going to get an employer's attention. I also want to go over some general resume tips. First off, you want to use a consistent font size and font. So you want to use 11 to 12 point font for content and 12 or 14 to 18-point font for your name and your headings. You also want to make sure that you're never using more than 1 or 2 fonts on your document, and that those fonts are a reflection of your personality. So you wouldn't want to use any kind of flashy fonts like papyrus or something like that. You want to use really conservative serif or sans serif fonts that reflect you as a professional. You also want to format that document professionally, so utilizing bold, underlines, italicized bullet points so that it is very easy to read. A document that is successfully formatted is one where you don't think about the formatting at all. You just look at the content and it really allows that content to stand out because it's very easy to read. You also want to think about having an appropriate resume length. And what I mean by that is that if you are brand new into a field, you probably are not going to have a 2 or 3 page resume. You're going to have a 1-page, one-sided resume. But on the other hand, if you have been in the field for 10, 15 years, it's perfectly appropriate to have a 2-page resume. As long as your resume is highlighting your accomplishments at each of your previous jobs and not repeating itself, I think it's okay to have a little bit of a longer document. But I wouldn't go much over 2 pages unless you're really in an executive position, or if you're creating a CV rather than a resume. When you're creating a resume, you want to avoid using I, me, and my. As I mentioned, as often as possible, start out your sentences with a strong verb and leave off those personal pronouns. You want to stay positive in your resume. This is a marketing document for you, and it is your opportunity to highlight your accomplishments. You definitely want to be honest throughout your resume, but if you have information about disagreements with your boss or being fired or anything negative, you want to keep it off the resume and keep it really geared toward your positive attributes and your positive accomplishments. And of course, it sounds obvious, but it is very important that you double check your spelling and grammar on your resume. That is the #1 reason why resumes end up in the quote-unquote round file is because there are errors in your spelling and grammar. One thing that you could consider is simply running your resume through Grammarly before submitting it, and that is a good way to kind of identify those little inconsistencies in spelling, grammar, and also capitalization. Keep in mind that the capitalization on your resume should really be consistent with what you would use in other types of professional writing. Now, because we're putting such an emphasis on starting sentences with those action verbs, I want to share this list of action verbs which are located on our website under archived webinars next to creating your CV. These verbs are going to be helpful in showing your audience what you can do in those car statements rather than just telling them. So for example, if you wanted to showcase your communication skills, you could start your statements with things like developed or collaborated. Or if you wanted to showcase your research skills, you could use words like analyzed, designed, or operated. This is a very a useful thing to do, especially if you're trying to think of different skills that you can highlight on your resume. It's a great thing to kind of get your wheels moving as well. Allison has a question. She said, is Grammarly an app? Grammarly, I believe, does have an app, but it is a website that you can utilize to check grammar and spelling. If you're curious about Grammarly, the Writing Center has a lot of information on it, and it is free for Walden students and alumni to use, and you can actually, anyone can get a free version of Grammarly, and even though it's often advertised for students, I even use Grammarly. If you look at the Career Services blog, we recently did a blog post on Grammarly. Actually, one of the graduate assistants did a really great interactive video on it that you may want to check out. So now we're going to move on to an actual resume, and I'm going to go section by section and answer your questions as I go along. Now, when I'm in the header section, please ask questions related to the header. If your questions are in regard to the education section, please just wait until I get there. Nevertheless, I will be able to answer as many questions as possible. So starting out with the header, obviously you're going to see in this header, let me just grab a pen so I can show you what I'm talking about here. Here's the header. You're going to have your name followed by your credentials. You're usually going to have a physical address, a phone number, an email, and then you could also have a link to either a LinkedIn account, a blog, or a website. Now, a couple things to keep in mind with this header area. In most cases, you are going to have a physical address. However, if, for instance, you're in a situation where you are relocating to another city, you certainly can leave a physical address off. As long as you have enough contact information where an employer can reliably reach out to you, you can have just that email and phone number. Now, definitely make sure that you have a phone where the voicemail is set up. It's not full. It has a great professional phone message, not more of a socially orientated phone message. And make sure that your email address is a professional reflection of you. So while Jane loves poker at hotmail.com, there's nothing theoretically wrong with that. It probably doesn't describe Jane as a business analyst, so she'd want to choose something more professional and more general. Now, a quick note about adding a LinkedIn or other portfolio address to your resume. You want to make sure that everything in that LinkedIn portfolio or profile and everything in the portfolio is proofread and looked over with the same care that you would undertake for anything else that is related to your resume. So we have a few questions. Jessica asks, Terry asks, How do you get a LinkedIn address? So when you go to your LinkedIn account, if you take a look at your settings, everyone has a LinkedIn address for their profile. So it's just a matter of grabbing that LinkedIn address from your profile and including it into your document. And in fact, you can even change the LinkedIn address to customize it in most cases. Jessica asks, would using home of record address be appropriate if I'm applying for overseas? Absolutely, Jessica. You could use more of a local address if you have a contact living there, or if that is where you intend to live if you are applying from overseas. The one caution that I would say is that if you're going to use a local address, they are going to assume that if they call you in for an interview, you're going to be able to take that interview. So you want to make sure that if you're going to portray yourself as being in that home locale, you are going to be able to get to that city to interview if that interview is offered. Terry asks, are there dots in the phone number more appropriate than dashes? It does not matter, Terry. You can use dots or dashes just as long as it's consistent throughout the document. It's more of a stylistic choice. Karine asks, I've been told that Hotmail isn't professional and to use Gmail or other email. Do you have feedback on that? Karine, I've heard the same advice. I think it depends on your industry. I think if you work in more of a tech industry or the design industry, it is not that impressive to use both Hotmail or Yahoo. It's better to use Gmail, or even if you have your own website, using your own email address. Ashley asks, does the color of the font matter on a resume? Ashley, that depends on the industry. So for example, in education, like K-12 type education, I think that color is a little bit more accepted, or if you're in a design field, certainly color is more accepted. If you were in banking, however, you would want to stick to a black and white resume. The font itself should be something easy to read. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. Victoria says that it's possible to use career services for creating a website. Is creating and maintaining that website free? And she says, I've never done it before, thank you. Victoria, yes, it's completely free, and maintaining it is completely free. All you have to do is sign up for that Optimal Resume account, and you can create that job search website. Keep in mind that it is a job search website though, so it's not going to be as flashy as, you know, Squarespace or some other website platform. You know, you can't use it for e-commerce or something. But if you're looking to create a job search website, you can absolutely do that on Optimal Resume for free. Karine says, I've been previously advised to leave the address off entirely for security reasons. They can also reach you by phone or email. And employers are not likely to send you mail. And she was told for federal resumes you should remove hyperlinks. So I have definitely heard the advice that, you know, you could leave off your address for security reasons. For various reasons, I don't always agree with that advice, simply because your resume is not something that you're sending out willy-nilly anyway. It's not like you're handing it out to people on the streets. It's going to an applicant tracking system. And oftentimes, if you leave the resume off, or the address off, sometimes there is an assumption that you don't live in the area. So for various reasons, it is my opinion that you should put it on if you live in the area. For federal resumes, removing the hyperlinks, I had not heard that, but that could be true. And there really is no reason to have hyperlinks unless you're putting that information on for a website. Excellent. So let's move on to the highlight of qualifications, or the summary section. So this is where you are going to really match your credentials to the exact job that you are going to be applying for. So where you may keep a lot of the same information under education and experience from job to job, this section right here, this summary section, really should be entirely tailored for every single job that you apply for to directly connect from what your experience is, why you're qualified to do the job that you want. So you can see here in this case, Jane has tailored her title here. Instead of simply saying summary, she's titled herself Experienced Business Analyst. And she's really picked out what she feels are the strongest 3 pieces of evidence as to why someone should hire her to be a business analyst and highlighted them here. This is a great important section because it is really the first impression that people have of you. And I sort of think of this section as kind of a movie trailer. You're really picking out the most exciting parts of your experience and inducing them to read on further. If you are less experienced in your job of choice, this might also be an area where you include some skills and educational experience that might make you experienced for the job. So questions on the summary section. Any questions on summary? Has anyone in this group been given the advice that you would, instead of a summary, want to do a kind of state your intention? Because I know that was advice that was given years ago, is that instead of the summary you would kind of lay out what it is that you wanted. Nowadays, it is more common to really use this to showcase what you can do for the employer rather than what your employer can do for you. Sharmella asks, how does this work if you are recently unemployed? Great question, Sharmella. So in this instance, I would outline the work experience that you do have and possibly what you've been doing since you've been out of school, whether that be pursuing a degree here at Walden, doing relevant volunteer work, or doing freelance work. All those things could be things that you highlight. Corrine asks, how do you tailor the summary section if you're transitioning into a new type of work? This is where you would want to look for your transferable skills and your objectives. And by transferable skills, I mean, what are the skills that you're taking from your current type of employment into your new type of employment? Is it, you know, assessment skills? Is it data analysis? Is it communication skills? Is it marketing? You know, really try to identify what can I take from one job to another and highlight it in that area. And that's also where you could weigh it a little bit more heavily on your educational skills and understanding and your skills in general. Tequila asks, should we use bullets or paragraph? You can actually use either. I actually like bullets because I think it's very easy to read quickly, and I do know that in most cases they're trying to go through that information rather quickly. And Kawasi asks, what's the length of the summary? I would say no more than 3 to 5 bullets. Great question. So moving on to the education section. So the education section, you are going to be listing your degree first, then Walden University, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Many people don't know that. That is the academic home of Walden University. And then you're going to be listing your expected graduation date of your current degree. Just like your experience, it is going to go in reverse chronological order. That is, the most recent item is going to go first. Some things that you can also add in here that maybe is not reflected in this particular resume sample. You can add in relevant coursework. You can also add in any kind of student groups that you might be a part of, or even high-level projects or internships. questions about the education section? Ashley asks, when applying for a job while still attending a degree, would you include the degree on the resume and just indicate that you're currently acquiring the degree? Yes, Ashley. So for instance, if you were currently pursuing this doctorate of management, you would still put it here under education, but because you have this expected date, it indicates to the employer that you're currently pursuing it. Great question. Kevin asks, where would you put certifications? Jessica, Kevin, you certainly could put certifications under education, or you could create your own section for certifications, especially if you are in an industry where certifications are very important to your hireability. Jessica asks, would you include practicum experience under education or experience? I would say that depends on how long ago it was and if you're switching fields. So if you are currently doing this practicum experience and it is the most relevant experience you have in the field, I would put it under the experience section because that is going to be the bulk of your experience in this industry. Now, if you did your practicum 20 years ago and you've been working in the field for a while, I would add it more in education. Corinne asks, should you include your dissertation title and a brief summary of your research when you list your doctorate degree? You certainly can do that, Corinne, especially if it is relevant to the type of job you're looking for. Geneva asks, can I add my clinical hours and each site used for those clinical hours? I would say I would put more emphasis on the site and what you were doing at the site rather than just the hours themselves. And Maida, we are going to get to volunteer work. And then Kwasi asks, is it normal to include the GPA in the educational section? You certainly can include a GPA, but only if it's above a 3.5. And it really depends on your level. I would say at the master's level and the bachelor's level, you certainly can. If you were creating something for more of an education, you know, going on to be a teacher yourself, sometimes you can certainly just leave that off. Great questions. So let's move on to the experience section. So you can see in this particular example resume, Jane is listing her experience in two different sections. She's splitting it up into business experience, where she's kind of putting her relevant work experience, and then additional experience in those areas where it is less relevant, in this case as a receptionist. You want to always put the job title first, the organization second, and make sure that you have relevant dates. When you're actually creating these descriptions, keep in mind that the goal is, again, to put forward what are those transferable skills and accomplishments. If it's not a transferable skill, that is a skill that goes from one job into the job that you want, or an accomplishment, think about leaving it off. Now you want to quantify wherever possible. So you can see in this case, she's talking about the percentage in which she increased sales. She's talking about improved production. And when you use numbers like that, it's eye-catching and it also really increases your credibility. So I highly recommend that you utilize numbers wherever possible. Questions? Allison says, since Jane has experience, should she overall start her resume with education or experience? Excellent question, Allison. I was kind of waiting for someone to ask that. And the answer is, it depends. So if you have determined that your education at this point in your career is more impressive than your experience, then put the education first. If you feel that you have a lot of relevant experience, then definitely put the experience before the education. So it really is kind of evaluating the situation, deciding what is the stronger argument here, my education or my experience, and putting whichever one is more important first. When in doubt, put experience first. Most employers, when surveyed, will say they put a higher level of emphasis on actual work experience than education. Great question. Katie asks, how far back should I go with my experience? As a rule, you want to list 10 to 15 years of work experience in this section of your resume. Anything further back from that is aging you a little bit as a candidate, and some of that experience is a little bit out of date. So Ashley says, in that instance, if we have no work experience, would education come before experience? Yes. So if you don't have a lot of work experience, I would definitely put your education section first and then your work experience. You also manage skills or mentioned skills. If you have a lot of strong skills, make sure that you're adding that information here in the summary section, because that can help make up for a lack of work experience as well, is if you're adding lots of good content in your summary with your skills and with your education. Great questions. So now finally we're going to look at some of the other sections of the resume, including additional or professional memberships and community involvement. And I believe that we had a question regarding volunteer work from Midea, and this is where you'd put this, is under community involvement or volunteer work. I would recommend that you include professional memberships, volunteer work, especially if the volunteer work is relevant to your professional goals. Another way to handle a lack of experience is not only to list your volunteer work, but adding in a description that kind of calls out how you've utilized your professional skills in that volunteer work can also be very helpful, especially if you don't necessarily have a ton of work experience. This is also, these sections here at the end is also where you could potentially put things like publications, where you could put honors and awards. So basically any foreign languages, if you're fluent in more than one foreign language. This is really where you can put other qualifications that maybe don't fall under the headers of education or experience. Lindsay asked, I did a lot of things with my sorority and was president. Would that go into volunteer? Lindsay, if your sorority, like many others, did a lot of projects related to, you know, benefiting nonprofits or charity work, absolutely. Go ahead and put it in volunteer work. So if you guys organized a walkathon or did a charity ball or something like that, it's very appropriate to put that in under volunteer work and to highlight the fact that you did some leadership. Jessica asked, for publications, would a local publication be appropriate to place here if not published internationally? Great question, Jessica. So with a resume, you definitely can put local publications on your document. Now, if this was a CV, which is more of an academically orientated document, you would list that under popular media publications. But if you are using this resume to just apply for professionally orientated jobs, it's fine to just put publications. That's absolutely appropriate. Great questions. Can I put Geneva asks, can I put certifications in this section or should I put them under education? You can choose to either put those certifications under education or create a certification section. If you work in an industry where certifications are very important and you have a lot of them, you may want to create a section just for certifications. Kwasi asks, the active verb used in the experience section, should they be in the present or past tense? Great question. It depends on the job. So the job you're presently doing should be in the present tense, and all your past jobs should be in the past tense. Ashley said, I completed my capstone portfolio for my undergrad. Should I include that on my resume? Absolutely. You can certainly put that in. What I would do, though, is with that capstone, I would actually, capstone project, I would actually put that under education, under your bachelor's degree. Great questions. Any other questions before we move on?
You can work on your resume with the help of a career services advisor by scheduling an appointment through your My Walden portal. Prior to your appointment, we recommend that you watch Discover Career Services to become familiar with our services and how we can help you. You can do this by viewing Discover Career Services in our archived webinars gallery or by registering for a live webinar from our main Career Services website.
I also want to encourage you to connect with Career Services. So you can also connect with us by joining the Career Services LinkedIn group, following us on Twitter, subscribing to our YouTube channel, and that's where you can find all of those Career Services success stories. You can join us on Facebook, and you can also read some of those student success stories on our blog. And of course, you definitely want to take advantage of the features of the Optimal Resume system. I am a little biased because I manage the social media channels, but we work really hard to make sure that you have great content coming into your Twitter and Facebook all the time, and that you're the very first to learn about career services offerings. So definitely take a look at those different ways that you can connect with us. And of course, you can access all of our resources on our website at careercenter.waldenu.edu.